Hi again, everybody. I can't resist just saying hello to all of you who are chiming in on the chat. Great to see lots of New Yorkers here, obviously, representing from all the boroughs, which is very exciting. Snowed in New York City, I see. I also see we have some people from Ithaca. Wow, that's a great birding town. And Kingston and places out of the city. We have some Jersey representation. Excellent. Love New Jersey. Beautiful New Jersey. New Jersey gets such a rap from New Yorkers, particularly, but they don't understand how beautiful New Jersey is. Um, Awesome. Lots of people from all over the city. Well, we are going to be talking about how great, as many of you probably know, birding is all over the city. Wherever you live in the city, there are great places to go birding, from big parks that are amazing big parks that all the boroughs have to small little parks right in your neighborhood. You can find birds, often really unexpected birds, just right on your street, particularly during migration, which we are headed towards, spring migration. Welcome everybody again. I'm Tod Winston with New York City Bird Alliance. Really excited to have you all here with Tasha Naula, our public programs manager, who has helped put all this together. Thank you, Tasha. She'll be watching tonight and in the background. And she puts together all of the great programming that is happening this winter and that will be coming this spring. And I will be talking more about that later on in the webinar, hoping to get you all connected to all the amazing opportunities there are for birding in New York City. California. Hello, Pat from California. Um, Awesome. Yeah, those of you who've just chimed in, we have the chat open, and I've asked folks to just shout out where they're coming from. Glad to see we have people, lots of New Yorkers, but people from outside the city as well. Um, I'll get started just explaining a little bit of the nuts and bolts for tonight's Intro to Birding webinar. As you see, we have the chat open and also the Q&A open. The chat is just for, as it sounds, a good place to chat. I will be asking some questions and asking for feedback here and there through the webinar, and so please feel free to chime in on the chat with your thoughts. I really love this to be a chatty, interactive affair. So feel free um, to shout out your love of birds, to hopefully not boo me, but say whatever you'd like to say in the chat. We'll also have the Q&A open. The Q&A, though, is specifically if you have a question for me. So if you have a question for me that you would like me to try to address, please put it in the Q&A, and I will try to answer it either on the fly if I can, or if not, towards the end of the webinar. So I'm happy to get questions and to answer questions. Um, I think that pretty much covers those nuts and bolts. We're also recording tonight's webinar in case people need to leave or people miss it and you'd like to get to see what you missed. So Tasha will share a link to that in a follow-up email in a few days. Um, Okay, so I guess we will get started. It is 6:36, and we only have a couple hours to pack in a whole bunch of birds. As Tasha knows, I always try to pack in too many birds, so I want to use all the time that we have. Um, and I'm really excited to have you all here for Intro to Birding. To talk about all the great birds in New York City and how you can get connected both to the birds and to all the great people in New York City who love birds and want to protect birds, which is really ultimately what our organization, New York City Bird Alliance, is about. Um, I will start by just saying a few things about myself. I was lucky to have a nature-loving, bird-watching father, and so have been excited about birds since I was a little kid. And I've just always loved birds, been kind of entranced by them, and teaching this course And the beginning birding course I teach, leading bird walks around the city, is really just one of the great joys of my life. I love sharing my love of birds with people and getting them connected to nature and to how just fun birds are. Birding in my life has given me so much. So many fun adventures, great times with people, great times alone, peace. One of the great things about birding, I think, is that you can really bird any way you want, right? If you want to be with people and have a fun social time, you can bird that way. If you're sick of people and you want to just peace out and enjoy a connection with nature, then birding's for you too. If you want to really like a competitive race for who sees the most species of birds, you can do that. But you can also just enjoy birds and really not care a bit about what kind of bird you're seeing. And so um, so with that, I'll also say that birding, as our board member and my friend Chris Cooper says nature, it belongs to everybody, and everybody belongs to nature, and it's really important to New York City Bird Alliance, and it's really important to me personally that everybody feels welcome in our community, in New York City Bird Alliance's community, and in the birding community. So whoever you are, wherever you're from, whatever your background, please come join us and go birding. And I hope you'll feel welcome in the New York City birding community. It's a pretty cool group of people. Birders are generally pretty cool, chill people. And towards the end of the webinar, we'll provide lots of ways to get connected to birding in New York City. Um, Awesome. Thanks for the friendly comments. I Someone said I was a lucky child. I was a lucky kid, yeah, to be connected to all this as a little kid. I'm really grateful for it. I want to start with this intro side. I love this sweet little slide of some birds that you might be familiar with. People might recognize who's on this slide. We have several birds with crests. We have two tufted titmice, the little cute little gray guys. We have three cardinals, northern cardinals, a female there, and then two bright red males on the right, and then we have a blue jay. And I love this slide because it represents to me a little bit the contrast and what's exciting about birds. On the one hand, they're so accessible to us. They're so beautiful, bright colors. They sing. They can come really close to us. We can just go outside, and if we pay attention, there are birds everywhere. At the same time, I kind of feel like I know what's going on when I see birds. In this little scenario, I sort of can guess what's happening. It looks like those two male cardinals are concerned about that blue jay. They look a little threatened. They have their crests down. The cardinal on the left looks kind of interested. She has her crest up. I'm not really sure what those two little titmice are thinking about, but birds are a little bit like people. We can tell when they're scared, when they're angry, when they're happy, when they're singing. On the other hand, though, I'm always aware when I look at birds that I don't know what the heck those birds are thinking. When you look at birds up close, particularly through binoculars, you get this window into their world. You see that crazy bird head looking at you, with eyes on the side of the head, and you think, what a bizarre creature. It's kind of like an alien, and I don't know what's going on in that bird's head. So that it sort of represents that birds are so close to us, and I feel like I know them, but at the same time, they're so far from us. They're much more ancient than people. They've been around for millions of years. They actually, as a lot of you probably know, are dinosaurs. Birds are the only dinosaurs left on Earth. They're these ancient, wild creatures that just live right around us in our neighborhoods that often we don't even notice. Um, Birds also do something really cool that lots of people notice, even if they're not into birds. If I can get my stuff to work here, right? Birds sing. We're hearing the Peter, Peter, Peter of the titmouse and the beautiful melodic tweeting of the cardinal. And then the blue jay that kind of says its name, Jay, Jay. Um, okay, tonight in this intro to birding webinar in a nutshell, um, haha, birds eat nuts. What we're going to do is basically run through a whole bunch of stuff to talk about why birds are so great. Lots of you probably already have opinions about that. I certainly do, but we're going to talk a little bit about um, why we're even interested in birds. We're going to talk about why New York City, of all places, you wouldn't think would be good for birds, but in fact, it's one of the most popular birding spots in the world. We're going to discuss what a bird is. What is this strange feathered creature? And then we're going to get to the nitty-gritty of the matter, which is how do we tell one bird from another? I expect that's why a lot of you are here. It can be a little confusing, but also so much fun. Fun that just lasts years and years, your whole life, trying to figure out which bird is which. And we're going to talk about what you need to go birding or bird watching. By the way, birding is sort of the mod term for bird watching. When I was a kid, we called ourselves bird watchers. But nowadays, bird watcher sounds a little old-fashioned. So a lot of people call themselves birders, but it's the same thing. Um, and we're going to talk about how we can get more involved with birds, with protecting birds, with other folks who love nature and love birds. Great. Okay, so I like to go to this slide next because it shows again what I find so fascinating about birds. These mallards in the center, some of you might recognize that female on top and male mallard below. These birds live all over the world. Mallards, they rule the world. And but maybe not know the northern pintail. That's a migrating duck that comes down our way during migration and in the winter. These birds, ducks, are birds that we often see just waddling around ponds in our local parks. They're cute and they seem kind of silly, very vulnerable, right? And at the same time, here these birds are flying over the mountains of Alaska on a migratory flight that could be hundreds of miles. Birds seem so delicate, right, and vulnerable, and yet they're these amazing, resilient creatures that, as I've mentioned, have been on Earth for millions of years. They survive in conditions that people could not survive, in temperatures, at altitudes. They accomplish these amazing feats of flight, flying basically around the Earth, some of them, or that length each year. Birds are incredible athletes, is in addition to being so beautiful. This bird is thought of as one of the champions of migration, the Arctic tern. This bird just weighs 4 ounces, but every year it flies a 43,000 mile round trip from up near the Arctic Circle all the way down to Antarctica and back. Um, and many birds accomplish this, even birds much smaller than the Arctic tern. Birds are also beautiful. By the way, we're right in the middle of why birds are fabulous section. Uh, Birds are also very colorful, right? Birds come in amazing kaleidoscope of colors, like these finches and indigo bunting. By the way, most of the birds that we're going to see in this presentation are birds that we can see pretty easily in New York City if we go to the right place. So you'll see there might be a few outliers there, but almost every bird that we're going to see is a bird that you can see in New York City during the year. Including this bird. Birds come in amazing patterns that seem just so beautifully designed, right? And designed by evolution in this case. But this harlequin duck is a bird you can see out on the ocean in the wintertime right now, out along the Rockaways. Some birds are a little subtler, but have equally beautiful outfits, like the cedar waxwing with little waxy red tips and yellow tip on its tail. Um, Birds, of course, also, as I've mentioned, sing. I love, I laugh every time from doing this webinar for 10 years. I laugh every time I see this bird sing. It reminds me, again, just what a strange creature a bird is. The way its beak pops open when it sings, it's very different than a person. It looks a little bit like a puppet. Um, And again, what a beautiful, odd creature. This little songspur is a very common bird in New York City all year long. Um, okay. Um, some of you might be familiar with the term spark bird. This is a term that birders use to refer to the bird that sparks your interest in birds, that gets you really excited about birding or birds for the first time. Um, um, Someone in the chat, Michelle, says that her cats are running around trying to find the birds. Yeah, I've heard that before. Yeah, my webinars get cats excited. Um, uh, but for me, I feel like I have a couple spark birds. An honorary spark bird is this bird. I don't know what this is. We're hearing the wings and the voice of hummingbird, the ruby-throated hummingbird. I've always loved hummingbirds. I find them just magical, like little magical creatures. I've just been fascinated with them my whole life. My actual spark bird, though, that I first saw is maybe a 5-year-old, is this bird. Um, you can hear it there as well. When I was a kid, my father had built a feeder shelf in our kitchen window that we could see, so we could see the birds that came right up to the kitchen, which was amazing. Amazing bird feeders are amazing ways to, and are an amazing way to get close to birds if, as long as you feed them the right kind of feed. Um, anyway, by the age of 5, I was pretty familiar with the birds that came to the feeder, cardinals and blue jays and chickadees in the wintertime. And one day, this flock of these amazing birds that look kind of like parrots suddenly descended on the feeder, scared everybody away. These evening grosbeaks. Um, and this is a kind of bird that occasionally visits New York City. Um, uh, some winters, perhaps when there isn't enough food for them up north, evening grosbeaks come down south. We call it an eruption of birds, not eruption like a volcano, but eruption, IRR, eruption of birds. That's when a northern species comes south. Sometimes birds like the snowy owl do that too. And anyway, one day these birds suddenly came to the bird feeder and just blew my mind. Suddenly, these colorful birds showed up, kind of strutting around and making a scene. And I've always remembered it since I was a little kid. I've had dreams actually of looking at birds out that window and seeing flamingos and toucans and things fly by. I think all inspired by those evening grosbeaks. So that's my spark bird. I'm curious what spark birds you all have, if you have one. Don't feel bad if you don't. I bet your spark bird's just coming down the pike. But maybe jump in the chat there and let us know what your spark birds are. I see some of you are on it already. Oh, a rose-breasted grosbeak. Excellent, Janie. Well, you have a partner, Sparkbird to mine. Oh my God, I always love this. Such great birds. Cedar waxwings, everybody does. Bufflehead, my favorite duck. Red starts, blue jays, hermit thrush, amazing. Red-tailed hawk is a bird that, right, is incredible that lives in New York City. It regularly blows people's minds when they see it. Of course, yeah, we have such great birds here. Bald eagle also lives in New York City, nests in New York City, believe it or not, on Staten Island and hopefully soon in Queens. Um, all these great birds. I imagine some of you aren't really familiar with a few of these. The pileated woodpeckers, the woody woodpecker of the woodpeckers, amazing, uh, beautiful bird that also breeds on Staten Island. Staten Island has it going on when it comes to birds. Amazing birds in Staten Island, but amazing birds in all the boroughs. But uh, they have bald eagles and pileated woodpeckers. Awesome. Love to see all of these great birds. So many beautiful birds. So many of these guys you can see right in Central Park. Some of them now, like the junco, some of them, or the goldfinch, some of them more likely in a few weeks when flickers come back. So great. Well, thank you for sharing. A black and white bird on Brooklyn Bridge Park. I wonder what that was. I'm curious. Um, a small bird might have been a black and white warbler, but I don't know. So thanks for sharing your spark birds. There are. lots of people have a bunch of spark birds, and I hope that as you get more into birds, you will yourself have a number of spark birds. I feel like I'm always excited about a new bird, which is one of the things that is so fun about bird watching, right? Because it's something that's always changing. It's like learning any complex bunch of knowledge, learning a language, learning to play maybe instrument. You always feel like you can learn more. And for a bunch of reasons, birding is like that in ways we'll talk about. It's just an ever expanding world of cool creatures and nature. Oh, who doesn't love mourning doves? Awesome. They build a terrible nest, as some of you might know, but somehow they survived much longer than people. Uh, Okay. New York City. Why would New York City, of all places, be good for birds? Um, some of you, I expect most of you know better, but lots of New Yorkers really think that only a few birds live in New York City. And we all recognize them immediately. We recognize this bird in its typical habitat. I always feel bad for making a joke at the expense of the beautiful rock pigeon. They don't live in sewers, but they're very comfortable in the city. The house sparrow here is a bird that you see all over the city. And third bird that you generally see anywhere in the city is this bird. These three birds have something in common. Do people know what that is? What do these birds have in common? These birds are all birds that are not native to North America. These are birds that are from Eurasia that people brought to North America, and actually people have brought them with them everywhere, all over the world. These birds live with people. They live with people for thousands of years. They're very well adapted to living in cities. And we've adopted them, or they've adopted us. They each have their own story for how they got here. And I appreciate these birds. These are beautiful birds that sometimes get a bad rap because they live so close to us. They kind of skeeve us out, but they're so beautiful and interesting. However, you may know that beyond the rock pigeon, house sparrow, and starling, there are many, many birds that visit New York City. Nearly 500 species have been recorded here by crazy birders over many, many decades. Nearly 300 just in Central Park, and about 200 species regularly visit New York City. Um, so why New York City? I like to think that this pigeon's saying, why New York City? Pigeons have a hard time. They get all this grief from people. They're poorly treated. So it's sitting there looking over, just saying, why? But the real question is, why New York City? Why is New York City, which you would never think would be good for birds, so great for birds? And the answer lies in a few reasons. One is that if you look at this map, a satellite map, you can see that we sit sort of at a little bit of a turn in the coast. So when birds are migrating up or down the coast, they kind of come down the coast and get a little bit funneled by Long Island and by the coast into New York City. Some birds also migrate along rivers, and we're right at the base of the Hudson River. Also, you can see in the colors of that map that it's lots of green and then a big patch of gray, right? So we are in a place of super development, right, that is generally not so great for birds, and in ways that we'll talk about a little bit later, specific ways we'll talk about a little later tonight. But you can see that within that gray mass of buildings and cement in New York City, there are these beautiful green oases. Our parks are amazing refuges for wildlife and for birds. And migrating birds, many birds, particularly songbirds, migrate at night. And when they are flying, they've flown all night, and at dawn they're looking for a place to rest. And this is what they see, right? They see these green spots with trees and water. And so when birds migrate through here, up to 25 million birds migrating through New York City each migration season, they get funneled into our parks. So that means that for birders, New York City is amazing birding. New York City is like the kind of birding that I would dream about as a slightly strange young teenager obsessed with birds. I would imagine just birds flying all around my head. And on a really good migration day, when lots of birds land in the morning in our parks, it can be like that in New York City. I don't want to oversell it, but New York City is can have amazing birds, and that also happens pretty much anywhere you live in New York City, which is another really cool thing. It can be in the smallest park and just a few trees and a tree outside your window. You can see really cool birds that just stop here and kind of go, what the heck? What am I, what am I doing here? Luckily, though, New York City parks and National Park Service are doing a good job at making a lot of these parks rich for birds, providing fresh water, native plant habitats, and kind of places that are managed as wild spaces for birds. So hopefully that is good for birds in some ways too. We know that they're important for birds, and part of New York City Bird Alliance's work too is to make sure that these spaces are kept healthy and safe for birds, and that birds can get to them safely. This is just a little sample of the birds that we can see in New York City during the year. And all these birds are actually pretty easy to see, maybe except for the great horned owl there during the year if you go to the right place um, and you know where to look. Um, Someone in the chat mentioned the Eastern Flyway, which is exactly right. When we're talking about birds migrating through the city to the north and back south, we're talking about the flyway, which is, you can think of it as like a big highway in the sky of birds that are migrating every spring to the north and then back south in the fall. And every species has its own path that they follow on that. So it's not a simple thing, but we are right in the middle of that flyway, which is another reason why New York City is so primed to get amazing collections of birds. Great. I see a few questions in the Q&A, and I think we're actually going to get to a few of those as the webinar goes on. So I'm going to try to keep track of them. But if I don't get to them, please stay on and tap me at the end so I can answer them. Okay. Cool. So, okay, so we've talked a little bit about why birds are so great, why New York City, of all places, is good for birds. Let's talk a little bit about what a bird is. And here, please chime in again in the chat. What makes a bird a bird? What do birds have in common that make them different from other creatures? And please don't be shy. There's no wrong answer. Excellent. Kendall starts out strong. Uh, with feathers. Feathers are something that are unique to birds. And I see we have people who know their birds here. Hollow bones, right? Both feathers and hollow bones, as we'll talk about a little bit here, are adaptations that birds have developed to help them fly, right? To help them do something that this tree swallow is doing in the picture, something that is another, of course, thing that makes birds so incredible to us, right? They do something that people dream of doing their whole lives. They so effortlessly take to the air, soar above us. Birds have beaks, right? Like a few other creatures, they lay eggs. Excellent. Also, like a few other creatures. Um, and they have wings, indeed. So, right, birds have if we talk about what a bird is, right, they share some characteristics with other creatures, including people, right? Birds are animals like people. They have a spinal column. They're vertebrate like people. They're warm-blooded. They can maintain their body temperature in different kinds of temperature. That's particularly important right now in New York City. Like people, they walk on two legs. We don't usually think of that, but they do, like people. They lay eggs, external eggs, which people do not. They have wings like a few other creatures, right? Like a number of many kinds of insects, like bats. They have bills or beaks. By the way, bill and beak, same thing. Birders and ornithologists tend to say bill, but beak sounds good to me. Um, Some other creatures, like turtles, we say have a beak, or a duck-billed platypus has a beak. Um, and birds sing like people do. Apparently, mice also sing in tiny little high voices that we can't even hear, which is amazing. Um, okay, and then there's some things that are unique to birds, right? You guys got right on this. Feathers are something shared just by birds, at least among the creatures that are left on Earth. They are the only creatures that have birds. Um, Birds have evolved a number of characteristics that help them fly. Birds have, some of you might be familiar with the turkey wishbone. That the turkey wishbone is something that birds have evolved that's made up of their clavicles, but it's flexible. And that's because when birds fly, they have this quite violent action. They're doing it all day long. Some of them do it months at a time without stopping. And that wishbone serves a little bit of a spring, helping to give some force back when birds' wings come back up from the down flap, and it also is part of a structure that helps protect their organs when they're flapping. Some of you mentioned hollow bones, right? Hollow bones are light. So birds need to be light to stay up there. And they also have a specialized respiratory system that is partly inside their bones, which is kind of wild to consider. Birds have a system of breathing that allows them to take in oxygen constantly, both on the in-breath and the out-breath, which is wild. They actually store air in air sacs and inside their bones as well, that continues to get processed as they're breathing out, which is different than people, right? When we breathe out, we're not taking in any oxygen. That allows birds to fly long distances at a time. Um, those are just that's a very split second crash course in some of the things that make birds unique and that particularly help birds to fly. Where do birds come from? Some of you have already hit on this, and I mentioned it also earlier. I love this shot of a pair of osprey, two fish eagles, we sometimes call them, in Jamaica Bay. Kind of looks like they're coming out of the primordial mist there. Birds, of course, have served many important roles in human society over time. I feel like I'm now dating myself for these Flintstones cartoons. Hopefully, some of you know the Flintstones. Uh, but this corny joke does have a point, and that is to say that uh, birds are as old as other creatures in the Flintstones, right? I remember that Dino the dinosaur sometimes hung out with this bird. I remember being annoyed by the bird because it wouldn't stop talking in the Flintstones when I was a kid. But what's interesting about this picture, right, is that there's something that's not quite right. People did not live at the same time as dinosaurs. Dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago, so long ago, way before anything like a person was on Earth. Birds, though, that's a different question. Birds are actually even older than that extinction. Birds have been around for a really, really, really long time, like so long that we can't even really conceive of it. Um, a lot of you probably have know the movies, Jurassic Park movies. There have been many of them over the past few decades. And the Velociraptor is the fierce creature that's featured in those movies. The Velociraptor in the Jurassic Park movies doesn't look quite like this, though. We've learned things since the time of the first Jurassic Park movie. And one of those things we've learned is that velociraptors and a lot of the dinosaurs related to them, Maniraptors, which were part of the theropod family, they all had a bunch of characteristics in common with birds, including feathers. This is discoveries of feathers on non-bird dinosaurs are one of the big clues that led us to understand what we now understand, which is that birds actually are dinosaurs. Birds are considered by taxonomists the last branch of dinosaurs to have survived 65 million years after all the other dinosaurs are gone. I always get kind of moved when I say that. It still blows my mind, right? That we have these creatures around us, chickadees and cardinals, that we hardly give a second thought sometimes. And these are incredibly ancient creatures, the last of their kind, that have been resilient enough to survive long past all of the relatives are gone from the earth. Amazing. And in the time since non-bird dinosaurs went extinct, birds have kind of taken over the earth. Birds have evolved into lots of different forms, 10,000 or depending who you talk to, maybe a lot more than that species. Over 2,000 recorded just in North America. And as I mentioned, nearly 500 just in New York City. So that is also partly why birding is so exciting. There are lots of kinds of birds to see, and as you get into birds, you realize that there are many kinds of birds to see, not just in New York City, let alone everywhere else in the world. But you can see here in these illustrations, right? Birds have the first bird I think that we really know about, birds we know about were kind of crow-sized, there are some that look a little bit like a chicken. Now these birds have from the tiniest hummingbird to the ostrich to the eagles and flamingos, all different kinds of forms that live in pretty much every ecological niche across the world. Okay, so we talked a little bit about what makes a bird a bird. Let's get to the meat of the matter, which is which bird is which, right? How do we know what bird we're looking at? And I'm hoping that in a real little crash course here, I'll get you familiar with some of the things to think about and the tools to use to help figure that out, whether on your own or with other bird-loving people. Okay. As we talk about that, I just want to look at a drawing of a bird. Please do not feel you need to memorize any of these terms or stress out about it. It's really just a way to think a little bit about what makes up a bird and what we want to look at when we see a bird for the first time. Um, I remember as a young birder, and I still do this when I'm abroad and seeing birds I'm not familiar with, looking at a bird and saying, "Okay, wait. So what does the head look like? Does it have an eyebrow stripe? Does it have a wing bar? What?" And then the bird flies away, and looking to figure out what bird it is. So this is to sort of get you focused on that a little bit. What should you look at, right? And we can see, right, that this little sparrow. Has a bill of a particular shape, kind of a conical shaped bill. It has an eyebrow stripe. It has an eye line partway through the eye. It has an eye ring, right? Actually, partial eye ring, not all the way around. You can see it has a throat that's not the same color as its mustache here or malar stripe. The breast is a different color than the belly. Sometimes the flanks or the sides of the bird are a different color. The undertail might be a different color than the belly or than the top of the tail. And then here on the bird wing, right, we see the beautiful the structure of a bird wing, this elegant construction where the longest flight feathers, which are the primaries, these longest feathers, the secondaries, and the tertials, they kind of fold under each other like a fan to protect the most important long primaries. And over those flight feathers, we have what we call coverts that cover those flight feathers. Sometimes those feathers have a stripe on them that we call a wing bar, right? So just a quick review of some parts of the bird. When we see the bird fly, of course, we get a whole different perspective, right? Those wings fan out. Suddenly, we might see color that we don't see when the bird is perched. We might see an underwing that's a different color than the overwing. We might see big patches of color in the tail or the wing. We might see the rump, basically kind of the butt of the bird might be a different color than the back or the crown of the bird. So as we look through a smattering of birds and we talk about the different ways we distinguish from another, I'm going to refer to some of these parts of the bird and to help kind of get in your head what you're looking for. Here's an actual bird. Maybe some of you recognize this lovely bird, um, common in New York, in some parts of New York City. This is the northern mockingbird. Um, and you can see when this bird is perched, right? Oops, sorry. When this bird is perched, we see it has a wing bar on its wing coverts. Um, uh, when it flies, suddenly we see these big patches that were invisible when the bird was perched. That's often the case with birds. Sometimes birds have patches in their wings and tail, we think, partly to alert other birds to danger. It gets your attention if the bird flies. It also might be a way to misdirect the attention of a predator. If the predator goes for the wing feathers or the tail feathers, it can't quite get a grip, right? Instead of going at the body of the bird. So we think that birds often have this kind of pattern to distract a predator or keep the predator from getting the good parts of the bird that might actually hurt the bird. Um, okay. Okay, so I digress a little bit from which bird is which, just to talk a little bit about how birds are made up, what their structure, basic parts are. But let's get down to the nitty gritty. Which bird is which? And I want to talk about that a little bit in a sense of narrowing down what bird you might have staring at you or singing at you. And we do that by thinking about where we are in the world, what kind of habitat we're in. Habitat is sort of a collection of kinds of plants, water or no water, other animals in which a particular creature lives, right? So creatures live in different habitats, and we have a bunch of different habitats right in New York City. And then also, we're always looking at a bird at a particular time of year. And location, habitat, and time of year all narrow down the kind of bird that we might be seeing. Then we have a bunch of ways that we can tell one bird from another. Birds make sounds. Um, Birds have a different size and shape. They act differently from one another. And then, of course, they are different colors and patterns. And then color and pattern gets to field marks, which are some of the things I was talking about, an eyebrow stripe, a wing bar. Those are little dribs and drabs that help us or even that help us tell one bird from another. So we're going to kind of quickly go through some of these ideas, and as we do that, we're going to look at uh, a bunch of the birds that we can see commonly in New York City to help us get familiar with them. We'll start with this top tier, right? Things that help narrow down which birds we might see. Location, right? All New Yorkers know it's all about location. Um, and it's true with birds, right? Anywhere you go in the world, there are different birds. This means that we can't see all 10,000 species in New York City, very likely. We see just a tiny group of those, that big group. This also means, though, that as I mentioned, anywhere you go in the world, you see different birds, which makes bird watching very exciting. Um, uh, Anywhere you go, different birds. So in North America, we might see the ruby-throated hummingbird that we already showed you. We might see the beautiful Baltimore oriole. These are all birds we can see in New York City, by the way. The red-tailed hawk or the great blue heron. If you're from South America or visit South America, you might know the ruby topaz hummingbird. Dying to see that bird. Haven't seen it yet. The Toko toucan, the swallow-tailed kite, which also comes to Florida, or the roseate spoonbill. In Europe or North Africa, you might see the sunbird, the hoopoe, or the lammergeier, an amazing vulture that cracks open bones, or the greater flamingo. Yes, flamingos live in Africa and in Southern Europe, as well as in the Americas, different kind. If you're from Asia or visit Asia, you might see the mandarin duck. Didn't you see the mandarin duck that visited Central Park maybe 5 years ago? It was a huge celebrity in Central Park for a little while. We don't know how it got there, and we don't know where it went. Um, the azure-winged magpie, the crested ibis, or I just discovered this wild-looking bird, the Temminck's tragopan. Or finally, if you go to the South Pacific, you might see the Vogelkop superb bird of paradise. If any of you aren't familiar with birds of paradise, they have these amazing displays of phosphorescent feathers. I'm not sure if that's actually the quite the right word, but they reflect light in a really intense way as part of their breeding display and put on this dance by putting up their feathers in a certain way. You might see the sulfur-crested cockatoo or the southern cassowary, a bird that occasionally kills people by kicking them so hard, um, or the royal penguin. Just a little sampling. Once you get into birds, you realize if you go on a trip, oh, what are the birds? And if you get into birds after you've already been traveling a lot in your life, you're suddenly like, darn it! you, I missed all those good birds. Birding makes traveling so fun and exciting. If you have a non-birding spouse or partner, it can cause a little bit of friction, I might add, but hopefully you can work that out. Okay, so where you go and where you live, right? Narrows down what birds you can see. Also, where you live, there are different habitats. So, for example, these two birds, someone who mentioned a black and white warbler, or a black and white bird in Brooklyn Bridge Park. I wondered if it might be this bird, or unless it was a bigger bird. Um, or this bird, they look kind of similar, these two birds, right? But if you didn't get a great look and a good light, but there's something that helps you determine which is which, and that's immediately, which is where they are, right? The black and white warbler hangs out in forests and goes up trees. The water thrush hangs out at ponds and streams, usually on the ground. Um, this black and white warbler, we can see it in action. It's hard to keep up with it. Where'd it go? There it is. Hangs around, climbs around trees a little bit like a nuthatch, if you know what that is. A little bird, a little bit like a woodpecker, but a little more agile. Whereas the water thrush walks along edges of ponds and streams, often bobbing its tail, by the way, which is something else that's helpful. Um, Habitat, where a bird is, can really help you know what bird you're seeing. It's so helpful that in a particular habitat, you often know before you even see a bird what birds you're going to see, right? It's a little bit like a magic trick. If you already know an area and know your birds, you can kind of go, whoop, 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 and people are like, how did he know that? And it's because you already know what birds to expect, right? It's a little bit like if you go to your job or to your local pub, you know who's going to be there. So you hear just somebody laugh and you're like, oh, it's Charlie. You know who's there. So that helps you. Here's something else that helps us narrow down what bird we might see. This white-throated sparrow and this chipping sparrow, they're pretty different looking, but if you don't get a good look, sparrows are hard to see sometimes. But the white-throated sparrow is here in New York City right now. It comes and spends the winter in New York City, and by like late May, they've all flown north to breed. They don't nest in New York City. The chipping sparrow, though, pretty much they're all gone now. It's rare to see one in the dead of winter. But come May, they arrive and they nest in the city. So different season means different birds. So that means that you kind of can tell what birds you might see at a particular time of year. It also is another thing, like location, that makes birding really fun because it changes all year round, helps you get connected to the changes of the seasons. Right now, all the birders are like, spring's coming, all the birds are coming. Like it's very exciting and they're here for a little while and then they're gone. And then we have different birds. So different season is a different time of birds. So that helps us narrow down what birds we might see and also makes birding interesting. Then we have a bunch of different things that distinguish one bird from another. And let's just talk about each one in just kind of a simple way. Often when we're out birding, right, this is what we see. We see like a wall of green and we might hear a bird. This is my favorite bird song. Anyone know this bird song? Um, Bird sounds. Bird sounds I can't really overstate how helpful and fun it is to get to know the sounds of birds. This is the wood thrush, beautiful woodland bird. It's a really beautiful call too. Um, um, and you know, getting connected to the sounds that birds make, for me personally, has made me my whole life feel so connected to nature. Um, if I haven't mentioned it already, you've probably noticed I'm gonna get a pretty, my corny level can get pretty high when I talk about birds, and it can go even higher. And that's just to say that, like, when I hear birds call, I really do kind of think of birds as my buddies, as my friends out there in nature. I know they're not really my friends, but most birds really don't care much about me, but I love them. And I feel connected to nature when I hear birds. I know who's there. I know when someone unusual shows up, like, hey. And sometimes there's a bird that I'm like, who the heck is that? And so it makes you so connected to what's the life around you, right? It also really helps you as a birder, if you want to get stronger in your birding skills, to know what's there. You often know pretty much all the birds that are around before you even see a bird, right? Because you hear them, particularly in the spring. Um, but even if you don't want care to spend the time to really make sure which bird is which, if you get connected to bird songs, you will suddenly discover and sounds, you'll suddenly discover the birds are around you all over the place. Birds are everywhere, and you just weren't quite listening for them. A few other greatest hits of bird sounds. We already saw a picture of this bird. This is 9 times out of 10, the bird that people are talking about when they say, I heard a bird singing and it was so pretty. This is the white-throated sparrow that's here right now, often sings in the wintertime. People say it says, Oh, sweet Canada, 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 because it's dreaming of flying north to Canada where it nests. Um, and one more, a tiny bird with a big personality. That's the ruby-crowned kinglet, male. Can hide his crest, and then when he's worked up about something, he can explode on the top of his head with all that red. There's one that's been hanging out in Central Park all winter, hanging around eating somebody's peanut butter. Um, okay. Um, so just to say a little bit about bird sounds, right? Because if you're not familiar with birds, you might not be familiar with sort of the different sounds that birds make. We think of bird sounds in basically two main categories, with a few other exceptions. But for the most part, birds have, particularly songbirds that we see a lot around us and love to see in the parks. They have a song and they have a call. Song is what you might expect, has a melody, right? It's longer and in phrases, like a song that we would write or sing. Lots of singing in the spring, which makes birding in the spring different and exciting. Mostly by males, but not always. Some female birds sing. More often in the morning and in the early evening, which is why in spring particularly, birding can be really fun in the morning and the evening, though you can always find birds if you're looking hard enough. Um, and then interestingly, song, which is what songbirds do, is a skill of songbirds, particularly that group of interrelated birds, is both inherited and learned. That's similar to human language, right? We have to learn our language from our parents or from someone else who can speak. And if we don't learn to speak. And if we don't do it by a certain age, too, we don't learn to speak quite in the same way as someone who learns as a young child. That's the same for birds. We now know from lots of people who've studied birds. Bird song is, in a sense, bird culture that's passed down through birds through millions of years. Birds have been singing to one another, learning their songs in the same way that people learn their languages. There are dialects of bird songs. Bird songs in a species can change quickly sometimes as they learn a new variant of their song. So that's kind of amazing to think of, right? This is songs are a culture that have been passed down for much longer than people have been on Earth. Then we have calls, which calls are sounds that all birds make. They're usually shorter. It can be any time of the day or the year, mostly because they have distinct purposes or meanings that are important. Oops, sorry. Um, Calls might mean I'm hungry. It might mean get out of here, or it might mean come over here. Bird calls mean something that are important for birds year round, versus songs that are mostly during nesting season that are about males attracting females usually. Okay, let's focus on one bird. Um, the American robin. Probably a lot of you are familiar with this bird. It's one of the most common nesting birds in New York City. And we're going to listen to a recording of all of its calls. Just to give you a sample of the variety of sounds that just one bird can make. And I don't want you to be overwhelmed by that. As you get to know birds, you'll find that cool, right? And you can pretty quickly actually get to know all the sounds of one bird. If you are interested in getting to know bird sounds, it's good to get to know a bird like the robin or the blue jay or the white-throated sparrow. Um, get to know those sounds because you hear them all the time. And once you get to know those common birds, then you start to hear other stuff and you go, what's that? Makes you realize you need to go find out what that bird is. And you can kind of build your repertoire in that way. All right, let's listen to the robin. This is the typical song, little triplets of sound. Some of you might recognize that sound. Many birds have a dawn song. This, which is like a little hopped up on hormones, very excited, just woke up. And then it has a whole bunch of calls. The whinny call means it's upset. This also means it's upset about something. Probably a different kind of upset, but I don't think we understand it. Believe it or not, that is a call that a robin makes when a predator flies overhead. And then this is the sound they make during migration. Sometimes robins make that see when a plane flies over. But many times I've heard that call and then discovered all the birds kind of hunker down. And if you look carefully, you might find a hawk or an owl. Okay, so sounds. Sounds are something that helps us figure out what bird is which, right? Every species has its own different call and song among songbirds or call among non-songbirds. Here's something else that's really obvious that distinguishes one bird from another, right? This red-winged blackbird needs to pick on somebody his own size, right? He's going after the osprey. Birds are different sizes, and that can obviously help us distinguish one species from another. You have to be careful though, because size can be amazingly hard to discern if you're not sure how far away something is. In this photo, we have what I know is I'm almost certain is a crow by the shape of it in here on the right. On the left, though, this bird continues to be a mystery to me. I'm not quite sure what I'm seeing there. Is it something like, is it a songbird like a robin that's just a little further away from the crow, but smaller? Or is it a bird that's even further away, like a hawk? And I can't quite make out the shape of the bill. That's often the case when you're bird watching. You see a bird, you're not sure how far it is, and you can make the wildest of mis-IDs thinking that something is further or closer than it actually is. I've embarrassed myself many times by calling something like I remember once being on a trip and calling like a starling a vulture or a starling or something because I couldn't tell how far it was. Um, I remember I did that once on a trip in Minnesota where I was actually on a tour with somebody. It was our first day out to see all these cool northern birds in the deep snow. And I was looking out the back window of our van, and as we stopped, the guide had gotten out of the van to look. And I said, "Oh, there's a hawk or a raven or something perched over there." And he said, from outside, "What? Where? I don't see that." I said, "Oh, right over there, perched on a pole." And he's like, "I don't see that bird." So I was like, "Okay." I get out of the van, and through the fuzzy window, I couldn't really see well enough. And what I thought was a really big bird was a starling, this big. And the guide who I had just met, as yes, I'm a guide in New York City. Blah, blah, blah. He goes, "Oh, well, that's just a sweet little starling." I, my face must have been like, oh. I just lost all this guy's respect. Anyway, I don't mean to tell that story that you should be stressed out about that. Birders make mistakes all the time, even experienced birders, and I always make it a point, I hope, on my walks that like no call is a bad call, and never be embarrassed about making a bad call because that's how you learn like anything, right? You make a mistake and then you remember it. So I always like I remember my mistakes and I'm grateful for them because I learned when I made that mistake. And when you're learning anything, you're always going to make lots of mistakes. Don't worry about it. Okay. Size also can be, it's not just about the overall size, it's also proportion, right? The size of this part versus that part, right? So in this case, when we have a downy woodpecker and a hairy woodpecker, yes, the hairy woodpecker is bigger overall on the right, but it's not that much bigger. And if you don't see them together, like these two helpful woodpeckers are, it can be really hard sometimes to tell, wait, how far is it? How big is it? But what's helpful is that the little downy woodpecker has a dainty little beak and kind of a smallish head, while the hairy woodpecker has this big beak and a big head. And that's something that you learn a little bit over time. But to me, it's kind of visceral it's like from my belly when I see a hairy woodpecker, if when I see a woodpecker and if I don't say, "What a big head, what a big beak," then I know I don't have a hairy woodpecker. Um, and again, that's not something you know immediately, but you get it over time if you see enough downy woodpeckers that, oh, that's different, right? That's big. Um, and again, it's the proportion of like the beak here and the head in this downy versus this hairy. I'll also just note, in case it's confusing, right, that both the downy and the hairy male have a red patch on their head. In this case, we have a male downy and a female hairy, so it's not the perfect comparison here. But the red patch doesn't help you know which species it is. You just know that it's a male, which we'll talk about again in a few minutes, because of the red patch. Okay, so we talked about the sounds birds make, the size of birds. How about this difference? I always find this kind of funny. These are two very different birds. They're actually very different sizes, but I've sort of taken that out of the equation by blowing up the nuthatch. Um, so now if we're not talking about the size, there's something, and they're actually very similar colors, these two very different birds, right? In the same places on their bodies. But the one thing that makes them very different is, right, their shape, right? This long live heron is a very different shape than this little stub of a bird with no neck, the white-breasted nuthatch, right? They're very different shapes, right? You can draw a nuthatch basically like that. That like the heron is like this long, drawn-out affair, right? So birds are very different shapes, and along with song and calls, I would say this is the most important thing as you're getting to know birds to help you feel more confident in knowing which bird is which, and just getting to know birds, noticing their shapes. Often when you're bird watching, this is what you see, right? You see a sort of dark shape against the sky. Um, and this is actually the field guide or the book, bird ID book that was the sort of the Bible of birding when I was a little kid. There's now another guide that I actually prefer, but this guide is still an amazing guide. And one thing that was really cool about it is that in the front and back covers, they had these diagrams. So when I was a kid, I had a birding friend that I still bird with today, who very happily lives in New York City. And we, as little kids, used to study these silhouettes And partly because of that, but partly because I just know these birds now. I think even as a little kid, I started to be able to say, "Oh, that's a kestrel. Oh, that's a mourning dove. Oh, that's a blue jay," which is different than a cardinal. Some of you, if you look at these, probably can pick out what kind of birds they are, even if you don't know the species, right? Maybe this bird you might recognize as a kingfisher. You might be able to recognize this bird with a bit of a crest as a kind of flycatcher, right? Every bird has its own shape, its own way of sitting, and um, uh, if it don't be shy and don't feel embarrassed. You feel free to take a screenshot of this if you like. These are super useful. If you have nothing to do some evening, quiz yourself on it because it really can help you feel more confident, get to know the shape of a woodpecker versus a falcon versus a shrike versus a swallow, right? I can go through these and I know what they all are. And most birders who've been at it a while could immediately say what most of these birds are just by the shape and the position of the bird. And that's true also in flight, right? Because this is even more so what you often see. You see a bird against the sky. What the heck is that? Right? But they each have their own shape. So also feel free to take a screenshot if you like. Um, and get a Peterson. It's a good guide. I feel a little bad sharing that, but they're really super useful. Okay, let's look at two actual birds and compare their shapes. Here, again, don't be shy, jump in the chat. What are the differences that you can see in the shape between these also very similarly colored birds, the northern mockingbird versus the willet, a kind of sandpiper on the right? Good, right? So AP says beak size, right? The willet has a long beak versus this cute little beak of the northern mockingbird. Good, right. Long legs and beak, right? Long legs, right? That's related to its lifestyle, to how it finds food. Tail size, good, right? The mockingbird has a really long tail. It's kind of spread here. Doesn't always spread, but longer than the kind of stubby tail of the willet. Good. Right. The willet has a long, skinny neck, right? Versus and kind of a pear-shaped body versus the kind of bullet compact shaped body of the mockingbird. Good. Excellent. Um, Right. So these are exactly the kind of things that we think about, right, when we are comparing one bird to another. Basic things that are the same skills really that we use in telling one person from another, right? How big is their hair? How big is their nose? How big are their ears, right? How tall are they? How wide are they, right? These are all things we think about. And with birds, it's the same thing, right? Birds, though, always have the same outfit on. Well, that's not entirely true, but a particular time of year, they always have the same outfit. Or only a few outfits. So they're more consistent than people in that way. Okay. Um, a one something specific about a bird shape that we've already touched on is again we can see that these birds all have crests, right? Maybe some time ago now, maybe 10 years ago in the beginning birding course that I teach, a very nice lady who still comes on birdwalk sometimes said at about this point in the presentation, um, Todd, this is all just great, but what I really want to know is which birds have crests? I remember laughing because it was sort of dismissive, but also just such a good question. And it's a good question, which birds have crests? That's an important shape thing. The birds we looked at here, and only a few others, cedar waxwing, some flycatchers, woodpeckers have crests in New York City, which is like, right, this kind of peak shape to the head. Um, so this titmouse and cardinal and blue jay all have crests, but it's also a good moment to point out, right, that birds can move their feathers, right? So this lady cardinal over here has her crest up. The males are down, and the blue jays is almost totally down. So it's hard to see it, right? Birds actually, we can't. It would be cool if people could do that, but we can't. We don't have muscles that can make our hair do cool things, right? Our hair stands up on end when we're scared or excited, but birds actually have muscles that control their different groups of feathers. So birds can choose to raise their head feathers or lower them. They can also choose to raise their body feathers. You might notice in the wintertime, a lot of birds look kind of like a big round fluff ball, and that's because they raise their feathers to trap warm air under their feathers to stay warm. They create like a little down jacket for themselves. So that's something to remember. And so it doesn't confuse you when you're watching birds. Birds can move those feathers around, not just their wing and tail, but all their body feathers. Another thing that's really important, which I mentioned when we looked at that bird diagram, is the shape of the beak, right? The shape of the nose helps us tell people apart. The shape of the beak helps us tell birds apart. And as opposed to people, the shape of the beak actually is really important for the bird in terms of how it lives and particularly what it eats, right? The beak tells us what the bird eats. So sparrows and finches are birds that have kind of a conical bill, a strong bill to crunch seeds. Songbirds like the thrush and the warbler have kind of a more delicate bill. They eat bugs and fruit. Birds that eat just insects have a few kinds of beaks. The swallow has a little beak, but a big mouth. It's kind of like a whale. It flies through the air and catches bugs on the wing, while a flycatcher has kind of a medium bill, but with a little bit of a hook, which you can actually see at pretty strong distance if you're looking for it, that helps it nab a bug in the air. The extreme version of that, right, of course, is a predator like the bald eagle. Don't get close to that bird's head unless you're really friendly with it, right? Because that beak can grab a rabbit, a bird, another creature in flight and hold on tight, right? So predators like birds of prey have a really characteristic shape to their beak. Parrots also have a similar beak shape to that, which is interesting. Um, okay, so, beak shape is really important, but let's return to the overall shape of a bird. I'm going to show you a few of these pictures a couple times before we're finished tonight, to try to get a little bit in your head this idea of looking at the shape of the bird, not the color, not the other aspects of the bird. These are three frustratingly brown, stripy birds that are related to other birds that might have brighter colors, but they have kind of characteristic shapes for their family, for that kind of bird. So this bird in the upper left has kind of a conical beak, right, for crunching seeds, kind of a round body and a longer tail. That's a sparrow, right? This shape is very characteristic of a sparrow, in this case, a song sparrow. The bird to the right, um, shaped a little bit like a robin, which is another member of this family, has a more delicate beak, has a big eye, right, and kind of a pear-shaped body. That's a thrush. Robin is a kind of thrush, colorful thrush. And then the one below has kind of a long, lanky body, a little bit of a curve, and a long tail. It's related to the mockingbird that we saw. That is the thrasher. The thrasher and the mockingbird and also the catbird are three birds that imitate other birds. They're all related birds, cousins that imitate other bird sounds. So here we have a sparrow, a thrush, and a thrasher. Then we have just three more, I promise. Three more drab, stripy birds with a different shape. Um, we have a cute little bird in the upper left with a sharp bill and a sharp tail and a sharp personality, often kind of horizontal, hopping around, never keeps still. That's a wren, in this case, a house wren. We have a bird to its right that sits on a perch with a crest, usually, flies out, catches a bug, and flies back to the same perch. Doesn't hop around. That's a flycatcher, in this case, called a peewee because it goes peewee. That's what it's called, but it's a flycatcher. Then we have a little cute bird with a round head and a round body and a thin bill. You might think it's a sparrow, but look at that bill. It's dainty. That's a warbler. Warblers are often very colorful, but this is one kind of warbler that in the winter, actually they're in New York City right now, is kind of drab, has the colors of a sparrow. Okay, so we have a wren, a flycatcher, and a warbler. Keep that in mind. We'll get back to that. Okay, so sounds size, shape. When we talked about shape, we talked a little bit about this next thing that helps us determine which bird is which. This warbler, these two warblers, they're both warblers, the white, black and white warbler and the water thrush. Water thrush is a warbler, confusing. It's a confusing name. These two birds, they look a little similar. We discussed it. They live in different kinds of habitats. They also, though, behave very differently, right? This black and white warbler creeps up and down a tree, right, clinging to branches and trunks. Um, this water thrush walks on the ground and bobs its tail, right? That tail bob, you see that bird walking along the river, and you know immediately, ah, a water thrush. There are two kinds, but we know it's a water thrush, which is a huge step from not knowing what kind of bird we had, right? So the way a bird behaves is really helpful. Let's go back to that common bird we listened to, the robin. Watch how it moves. This can't keep up with it. This robin, ooh, he's such a good worm hunter. This robin takes a few steps and stops. It listens for a worm, figures out where it is, and gets it, which is amazing, right? It listens for the crinkly sound of a worm under the ground. And that way of moving is very characteristic of a robin and other thrushes. It takes a few steps, it sort of moves upright and stops. That's very different than this bird. This bird, the grackle, kind of struts around like a cowboy pecking. Oh, there goes our song sparrow again. That was our song sparrow. Grackles kind of strut around like cowboys. They move differently, right, than a robin. Just kind of strut. These guys are a little nervous, I think, because of the camera. But they strut around. Yeah, he's anxious. See, I can tell you know that, right? You read that. You can read a bird the way you can read other creatures, like a dog or a cat. It's nervous. Um, uh, Also, we can see, right, that some birds gather together in flocks, which can help us know what kind of bird it is. Robins actually also this time of year gather in flocks, as do grackles. Some birds, though, you never see them in flocks, so that can help you know what kind of bird you have. Okay, so shape and behavior kind of go together, right? How does the bird move? What does it do? What shape is it? Um, and then here's really our last big category, which is so obvious, right? We've already talked about it, but these two birds are kind of a similar shape, right? Similar size. If you don't hear them, though, uh, the northern cardinal and the blue jay, right, are very different color, right? In New York City, there's only maybe two birds that are this red. There's generally only one bird that no, there are a couple birds that are this blue, three if we're lucky, or four, no, four. Anyway, there are only a few blue birds um, that we can see here, and but the color sometimes makes you know immediately what kind of bird you have, or what of just a couple kinds of birds it might be. Um, but it's not only the overall color, it's also the pattern of color, right? So as we saw, like in those silhouettes, sometimes we really don't see much of the color, but we might be able to see at a distance that this cardinal is all one color, even when it's dark. And we might see that even if we can't see the blue, that the blue jay is kind of light and dark. So the color is important, but also the pattern of the bird is color, the light and dark pattern of the bird can help you even when you can't see the color. Feathers can be very colorful, but other parts of the bird can also be colorful. These two birds, people know do you guys know these birds? These are beautiful. These are like our charismatic megafauna of New York City. We don't have, elephants or tigers, but we have beautiful wading birds, the great egret and the smaller snowy egret. Um, these these guys are pretty similar looking in terms of their color. Sometimes you can't tell how big they are, but we can see that this great egret has a big honker of a yellow bill versus this thin black bill of the snow egret. They have different colored skin when they're in breeding season by their eye. It's called the lure. pretty patch of skin. And then also their feet are different colors. Snow egret has these golden slippers, right, versus the all black legs of the gray egret. So once you get to know that, you know what to look for, and you can pretty quickly say, oh, snow egret, oh, gray egret, because you see the color of that particular body part, right? And when we get to talking about that, those little dribs and drabs, we're talking about field marks. Field marks can refer to lots of different things, maybe also the length of a bill. But in what we're talking, the kind of field marks I'm referring to here are these little dribs and drabs of color that we looked at on that picture of the sparrow. If we look at this yellow-rumped warbler, this is the spring version, male version of the yellow-rumped warbler, that kind of drab stripy warbler. In the spring, the male particularly gets super colorful. And you can see here, right? He has wing bars. He has a black mask and a partial eye ring. The white doesn't go all the way around. He has an eyebrow stripe or a supercilium, right? A supercilious person kind of raises their eyebrow at you. Supercilium or eyebrow stripe. He has a yellow rump, as a yellow-rumped warbler should. He has these patches of color and then a white belly and white under tail coverage. So let's talk about a few field marks that are really important that help you, that are important to look for. One, an old standby is the eyebrow stripe. This is the house wren that we saw earlier. We'll see again. This is a relative that's similar in shape, but has a really strong eyebrow stripe. The Carolina wren, right, has a strong eyebrow stripe that you can see even in bad light where you can't see the color. Eyebrow stripe or supercilium. The mockingbird on the right has those wing bars, right, that are part of the feathers that cover its flight feathers. The catbird, which I mentioned, which is you can see is a similar shape, same family of birds that mimic other birds called mimids. This bird does not have a wing bar. It also, right, has a different pattern of color on the head, has a black cap versus a black eye line. This bird also has a pretty yellow iris. So, right, a bunch of important field marks are about little dribs and drabs of color that you'll get to know that help you distinguish not just what kind of bird you have, is it a thrush or a warbler or a thrasher, but what species you have. What kind species, right, is a specific kind of bird that only breeds with itself. Okay, so that is the end of mostly of our crash course in thinking about how to narrow down a little bit what kind of bird we're seeing. And again, I hope you don't feel overwhelmed by that, but more just excited to see different ways to tell one bird from another. Don't be stressed out about it. You have all the time in the world that you want to take to figure out which bird is which and spend time looking at birds, which is really happily what will make you a more confident birder. Just spending time on your own with people as you wish with birds, right, is the way you learn. That's the way you learn anything, spending time with it. And as you spend more time with birds, you'll get more confident. So that's a sort of simple way to think about how we tell one species from another. I want to mention just a few sort of interesting complications in that which make birding interesting. Um, by the way, that's the end of the crash course in bird ID, but we have a few more things to talk about. So if you can hang on with me, I heard someone thanking me. I'm glad you're enjoying the webinar, but we have a few more things to talk about. So stay with me. We want to talk about birding gear and how to get involved, how to protect birds too. So a few complications we'll talk about in that system. One is this one. Do you guys recognize this bird? This bird is a bird that passes through New York City spring and fall. This is a scarlet tanager male in the spring, and this is a scarlet tanager male in the fall. So birds, as I mentioned, have the same outfit except when they don't, right? Birds, people know what the term used when birds change their feathers. Birds molt their feathers, right? So this male scarlet tanager is easy to identify by its name in the spring, but then it has this whole new outfit in the fall. You can see it still has a few red feathers left. That's often the case with a lot of songbirds and other birds too, that are males particularly are more colorful in the spring. They want to oppress the female. That's kind of the way it works in the bird world. Males are colorful. They have big tails and big bright colors to attract the female. In the fall, after nesting's over, they don't really need to worry about that, and it's dangerous to have bright colors. So most birds molt into more camouflaged colors and often look like the female in the fall through the winter, and then come spring, they get their bright colors back again. So that makes birding fun, right? Birds are different colors, different times of the year. So time of year, different season means different feathers. Another complication, as it were, in getting to know birds is this one, right? We looked at these two birds in the middle. These are two cardinals and then two house finches. Which is the male in this situation? As is often the case with birds, but not all birds, the male is more colorful for the reasons we've just been talking about, right? And in some birds, ladies and gentlemen look different, right? We call that in the animal world sexual dimorphism. Sexual because it's male or female. Dimorphism, dimorph means two shapes, two forms. So in a sexually dimorphic species, the male looks different to us than the female. An interesting, I'll make an interesting point about that in a second. Some birds are sexually dimorphic. Some birds, to our relief, are not, right? Some birds are monomorphic. The blue jay and the great egret, as well as the black-crowned night heron behind it, are monomorphic to us. The male and the female look identical. So many kinds of birds, this is the case. The male and the female look exactly the same to us. What's interesting about this is that some of you might know that birds see in a spectrum of light that is invisible to people. Birds see in ultraviolet spectrum of light. We can't see it. It burns our skin, but we can't see it. That means that birds see colors that people can't see. Birds see colors that we can't even imagine because we haven't evolved to see them. And we know that in the birds like blue jays, where the male looks the same to us as the female, the male actually reflects colors differently than the female. So that means that the male blue jay is actually different color than the female, but we can't see it. So that means that birds, and you might know that lots of things reflect ultraviolet light, plants and rocks and all kinds of things. That means that a bird seeing the world sees it very differently than a person. We can't even imagine what it must see, but it sees all these different colors that we don't even know. The only way we can even depict that is to show lots of colors that we already know, right? We can't imagine it, which is just wild. So a blue jay might look different, a male and a female to themselves, but they don't look different to us. Yeah. Okay. So um, uh, we've talked about sounds, size, shape, behavior, and color and field marks. Let's look again at those songbirds, thinking again about shape. Hopefully just tonight, you can start to hook your brain a little bit into this idea of some of these common bird groups that you're going to see that whenever you go out birding, you're going to see this bird or a relative of it on the upper left that has a thick kind of triangular bill for crunching seeds, kind of a round body and often a longish tail. That's a sparrow, right? The bird to the right, kind of shaped like a robin, kind of pear-shaped, big eyes on the side of its head. That's a thrush. Um, the bird down below is lanky, kind of a wise cracker, bit of a curve in its bill related to the mockingbird. That's a thrasher, but it's related, it's a mimid. It's related to thrashers, to mockingbirds and catbirds. All have the same shape. So we have a sparrow. Oh, goodness. We have we have a sparrow. Bear with me. We have a sparrow, a thrush, and a thrasher, or a mimid. Then these three other birds. Upper left-hand corner, we have a little bird with a sharp personality, a sharp beak, a sharp tail. often horizontal, always full of excitement and often pissed off about something. That is a wren, in this case, a house wren. To its right, we have a bird that sits on a perch, flies out to catch a fly, and flies back often with a crest, right? Doesn't hop around like a sparrow or a warbler. This is a flycatcher. Then we have a little bird that sort of looks like a sparrow. It's kind of stripy in this case, but it has a thin bill, often up in trees, hopping around, moving very quickly. This is a warbler. Wren, flycatcher, warbler. Okay. All right. So, birding gear. I'll say that, as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, there are so many ways to bird watch, and many bird watchers in the world don't have any gear, right? Many people who know birds very well don't have binoculars. They just know their birds and they spend time in nature getting to know birds, right? So you don't need this gear. And there are lots of ways to bird in New York City to have amazing experiences with nature and birds without any gear. Anywhere practically in a park in New York City, if you just kind of sit around and pay attention, you'll start hearing birds, and birds often will come right to you. It's kind of like build it and they will come. If you just sit, they will often come. So don't be intimidated by any of the gear. You don't have to have gear to watch birds. I know bird watchers actually who don't use binoculars at all. There's one lady who comes to my walks who just likes to listen to the birds and watch them. It's the sweetest thing. And she has such a great time birding. It's always really fun to bird with her. Um, However, bird binoculars are a tool that can be really useful. They can give you this amazing window into the close-up life of birds. Lots of people who've never used binoculars, the first time they use them, they're like, oh, no way. Like, because you can see a bird close up, you see what it's doing, you can look it right in the eye. Um, if you don't have binoculars, by the way, New York City Bird Alliance has binoculars we can lend you on our walks. And if you just let us know, and as do I think a lot of other groups you can bird with in New York City. So you can birders usually are game to let you try their binoculars to try them out. So let's just talk a little bit about binoculars. They're a pretty cool tool. And if you don't have binoculars, it's useful to. So I'm just noticing things in the Q&A. I'm gonna answer questions I think at the end. Okay, if people can hold on, we're nearing that, and then I'm gonna go through some of these questions. Um, Binoculars are identified by just a couple important numbers. Usually it's two numbers, and like 8 by 42. The first number refers to the power of the binocular. So how many times bigger is the image through the binoculars than with your bare eye? And a good number for binoculars is somewhere between usually 7 or 8. Um, you might think that higher is better. It's a bigger image, but if it's up near 10 or 11, it's so magnified it can get a little shaky. It also can be hard to find the bird because it's so magnified you can't see anything around the bird. So most birders use 7 or 8s. If you have trouble finding birds, as many people do, maybe start with 7s, see how those go. The second number is how big the lens is. And basically, that distinguishes whether you have a full-size pair of binoculars versus a mini pair of binoculars. Um, uh, 35, 40, 42 is a full-size pair. And I would recommend a full-size pair because you just get more light and more color through binoculars. Um, but yeah, and I'll talk a little bit more of that in a second. So those are two numbers to think about. I should mention, by the way, that all of this info is on our website and on our uh, beginner birding pages. So don't feel you have to scribble stuff down. You can find it all, and I'll provide some links that you can take a screenshot of or take a photo of to connect to all the resources on our website. So, but hopefully this will get it in mind if you want to get binoculars or get other gear. Um, Okay, a few binoculars tips. As I mentioned, don't be shy if you go on a bird walk with us or with anybody else. Usually birders are keen to share their binoculars, try them out. I recommend a full size pair just because it's really a better experience. You get to see more color. Most pretty good binoculars have this fully coated lenses, but if you're getting a cheaper pair, maybe ask. The coated lens basically means that none of the light gets lost on its way through the lens to your eye. So again, it's a brighter image. Um, and I don't mean to be flip with this. I know, binoculars, it's an expense, but you do get what you pay for. It's a long-term investment. I've had binoculars, my binoculars, for about 10 years. I actually have my father's binoculars, which are about 30 years old, and they're a good pair of binoculars, and I still use them. A good pair of binoculars, often the company will service for you for free or just for mailing it. So it's an investment that actually pays off over time, once you're ready to make it. But you don't have to spend loads of money on binoculars. I always recommend, I get no kickback from them, but B&H Video on 34th Street is a great place. They're really knowledgeable. They have a lot of variety, and you can try the binoculars there. And I recommend you do try them in the store to make sure that you can use them easily, that you can focus them easily, that they fit your face. If you wear glasses, make sure that it's easy for you to adjust the lens, the the eyepieces, so you can use them with your glasses. Um, okay. Um, okay. So binoculars are one thing that can really be a fun tool to use and to let you see birds close up. Um, also, Field Guide is it's kind of an old-fashioned book that people use to tell one bird from another. Even though these days there are lots of apps that we'll talk about in a second that help you identify birds, I still find a field guide to be a really helpful resource when you're outside. It helps you see very clearly. It's not backlit, and maybe you want to get off your phone for a little while. So I recommend getting a field guide. The one that I love now is the Sibley guide. I have it here, but I'm gonna have to run away to get it. But the Sibley guide is a more recent guide that is really beautifully illustrated guide that helps you identify one bird from another. The Peterson, which I showed you those silhouettes from, is also still a really excellent guide. So it's a little simpler. Some people who are getting into birds prefer it. And these are a few other options. Um, uh, One thing to note is that these top two are guys that have illustrations, paintings versus photos. And you might think that a guide with photo would be ideal because hey, it's a photo, it's exactly that bird, right? But the reason that I recommend getting a guide with illustrations is that in a photo, it can be hard to tell the difference between color and shadow and or light. So basically, like if I'm seeing a photo of a bird and the belly is dark, is that because the belly's dark, or is it because the belly's in shadow? I'm not quite sure, right? In an illustration, they actually take that variable out so you can just see the bird in kind of an even light, and it helps you more easily tell what you're seeing and really see what the bird looks like, what a typical blue jay or indigo bunting looks like. So I recommend that your main guide be one with illustrations, but these other guides, the Stokes guide, the Kaufman guide, which also comes in a Spanish version, or the AMNH guide, Museum of Natural History guide, those are all really also great guides. If you get into birds, you may find you collect field guides because it's useful to have a few different things to look at and they're fun. So I'm still sticking to to my push to get an actual book and take it with you. However, there are lots of online and phone apps too that can help you identify birds. I'll start actually on the right there. These are phone apps. You can see that the guides I mentioned, Sibley and Peterson, both have apps on your phone. It's a pretty cool tool. It has the whole guide, plus it has bird songs, so you can listen to what the bird sounds like, which is pretty cool. Um, um, Also, there are some other apps here that I'll talk about in a second. On the left are lots of places you to go to learn more about birds, to learn more about um, how to get connected to birding and bird watchers. Those top ones are on our website. Those we have a whole suite of pages that help you get to know birding, get you prepped and answer lots of questions and provide tips. There also are lots of other websites about birds. I particularly recommend the Cornell Lab. If you don't know what that is, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology is kind of like, oh, they're like the where it's at for bird knowledge and ornithology. Ornithology, by the way, if people don't know that term, that's the study of birds. Um, um, and Part of what Cornell Lab puts out are some apps that are super useful for birding. One is eBird, which I'm going to talk more about, which is a way to um, um, note and document what birds you see. And the other is Merlin, which is connected to eBird, which is an app that helps you identify birds. I used to not talk about that so much because it was new and it sort of felt like cheating. But I've discovered, right, that lots of new birders find Merlin super helpful. So forget I said that. It's not cheating. It's actually can be a really useful tool to help you get to know birds. And if you don't want to go on a walk, or if a walk's not available, Merlin can help you identify what bird you're seeing and what bird you're hearing, which is pretty amazing. Let me talk a little bit more about those two apps. eBird is this amazing tool. This is a map of where people use eBird. The lighter colors are where people use eBird. You can see that it's not evenly used across the earth. This is actually a pretty old map. I need to update it. I bet there's a lot more light color now. But you can see at the same time that birders are everywhere in the world that isn't, the middle of a desert or, the tundra, right? So that's an amazing thing that there's so many people interested in birds. It's also an amazing conservation tool because all of these birders are entering where they saw birds, and it's provided this amazing body of knowledge for conservation. We know where birds are going when they get there, in ways we never knew before from eBird. So eBird is both a really cool bird journal. I have all my bird lists I ever recorded my whole life in eBird now. I spent, my friend and I, who I mentioned, spent some crazy weekends typing in old bird checklists because that's how we used to keep track of bird trips. And now I can see every bird trip I ever went on since I was like basically a baby with my parents. So it's pretty cool, and you contribute to conservation by using eBird. Merlin is connected to eBird, and it can actually it connects with it, so you can use Merlin, and then you can keep a life list, which is the list of species you've seen in your life, through Merlin, and it will be part of eBird. Okay, so um, go see some birds. I hope you will. There are lots of people and groups to bird with in New York City. This is just a few of them. This is again all this information, all these like info heavy slides are on our website. Um, I hope you'll come birding with us, but there are lots of different groups to bird with. Um, and There are lots of ways this spring to bird. I hope you'll join some of you if you're interested. I teach a beginning birding course that I mentioned, which is in April. And We have three classes and two field trips. So check that out. We will see lots of birds, not just on my trip, but this spring. I hope you will start to get to know more of the birds of New York City. All of these colorful birds are going to be coming through here in just a few weeks. This scarlet tanager and blue-headed vireo and indigo bunting, rose-breasted grosbeak, great-crested flycatcher, and Baltimore oriole. All these warblers will be coming through New York City. So many kinds of warblers. Um, Before we go, I want to just briefly talk about the way that New York City Bird Alliance works to protect some of these beautiful birds. Warblers in particular are very vulnerable to a problem in New York City that some of you might know about. A lot of birds hit windows. Oh, uh, this is our website, which shows a picture of an ovenbird, a kind of warbler that has hit a window. And our project Safe Flight is a project that's almost 30 years old that is focused on protecting birds from window strikes. You might know that window strikes are actually a huge problem for birds. Over 250,000 birds die every year in New York City from window strikes. Across the country, more than a billion birds die from window strikes every year. It's a huge problem, and it's one of our main programs. We've had success in passing a law in New York City that requires bird-safe glass. That's often glass actually that reflects ultraviolet light, which birds can see, or has a pattern to help birds see glass, which birds don't perceive often as an obstacle and hit glass full speed. Um, uh, uh, Project Safe Flight is one of our main programs to help protect birds in New York City. We also do conservation research of different kinds. One program we've worked on for a long time is horseshoe crab research that helps protect birds like the red knot. We also have been studying the wading birds of New York Harbor for over 30, coming on 40 years. Um, you might not know that egrets and herons nest all over New York City. We have the biggest colony of wading birds in the Northeast here, right on Wild Islands in New York City. This is a colony of great egrets nesting, and we've been working to protect those birds for a very long time. We're working to protect specifically the black-crowned night heron right now. We do public education, telling people about birds that nest on beaches, like the common tern, to help those birds survive in hard times with rising sea levels. Um, I want to thank the photographers who contributed to this presentation. And before I let you go, we're going to look at those birds one more time to get them in your head. Here we have three drab striped birds. In the upper left-hand corner, we have a bird with a conical bill and a round head. What is that bird? That is a sparrow. We have a bird to its right with a pear-shaped body and a big eye, kind of a more delicate bill shaped like a robin. That's a thrush. We have a bird down below, lanky, with a bill that imitates other birds. That's a thrasher in this case, related to the mockingbird and the catbird. We have a bird in the upper left with a sharp bill and a sharp tail. That is a wren. A bird to its right sits, flies out, comes back after catching a bug, a flycatcher. And we have a little bird with a thin bill, a warbler. I hope this is not the end of your journey with birds. I hope it's just the beginning. And I hope you'll come bird with us. Our spring outings will be up on our website very soon. Next Tuesday, they'll be up on the site to check out. And then for our members, registration opens on March 5th. If you're going to go on some bird walks, though many are free, most of them are free, actually. If you're paying for any of our walks, though, it might be worth it to become a member. If you're not, you get a discount. Um, but if you're not a member, registration opens on March 12th. You can go to that site on the website to see those next Tuesday. Well, I'll also be leading Intro to Birding outings soon, three of them in March. So I hope some of you will come out and come birding. And I should say spring. Natasha and I noticed that right before this, and I forgot to change it. Spring beginning birding starts in April. And so if you want a more intense deep dive into birds, I hope you'll come out and bird with us. And with that, that's the formal end of tonight's Intro to Birding. I hope you've all enjoyed it. Thank you for the nice comments. And I'm going to go through these questions for those of you who hopefully you're still with me and see what people had to say. If you have other questions, please feel free to chime in and I'll do my best to answer them. A good combination of binoculars and camera. That's a really good question. I don't actually know the answer to that. It's something that seems so obvious, right? Like a binocular that takes pictures. For the most part, people who go on my bird walks still today, I've never seen anybody that actually had that. I think it's quite expensive and it's a little tricky. I have not seen a model that people actually use. Usually People have, though, at adapters that can connect their phone to a spotting scope, which is a bigger thing that people use to see birds far away. Or people just bring a camera with them. Lots of people who come on bird walks bring cameras, and the line between birder and a bird photographer is very blurry. It's a good question, Anita. I don't know myself of a model that people use, but it's a new technology. There may be good models, and it's a really great idea. Linda asked, is there any statute to protect birds from glass? Yes. So as I mentioned, we helped pass a law, local law 15. I think that's right, Tasha, several years ago that requires all new buildings in particular parts of the building to have bird safe glass. That is a big win, and we're very excited about it. It does leave, though, lots of buildings that have already been built that do not have bird safe glass. So we're still fighting to raise consciousness and get more bird-friendly buildings in New York City. And our Project Safe Flight volunteers, by the way, you can volunteer for the program. I should have mentioned that. That's one of our biggest programs. People patrol to look for injured birds, is a big contributor to helping us make change in that way, right? That our science fuels change that hopefully will help birds. And Project Safe Flight is a big example of that. Um, and Anita asked, how do you distinguish between all the many brown or gray birds? I think is what you're asking, Anita. Right. So hopefully looking at those six brown birds helped you start to think about that, right? Thinking about the shape of the bird, the shape of the bill, the way the bird holds its body. I think it can seem a little overwhelming at first, but as you get to know birds, you'll start to say, oh, that's a sparrow. That's absolutely a sparrow, or that's absolutely a warbler, right? It's just a matter of time and paying attention, giving yourself the luxury of paying attention and spending time with them. Um, Okay, Linda asked about putting up bird feeders, even 20 stories up. People do have bird feeders in New York City. It can be a little bit of a logistical question in a building. You don't want to attract rats or mice. So that's a complication that people in New York City have that people outside of the city don't. So that could be a problem in some buildings. But if you have a fire escape or a backyard, there you can think about how to have a bird feeder that won't have too much waste. You can attract birds. Lots of people do manage to attract birds to feeders in New York City. If you're going to feed birds, winter is really the best time to do it, like maybe November through April, when birds really need those rich fatty seeds, and you're not feeding some birds that are more problem birds that tend to more come in the summertime. Um, and if you're feeding birds outside the city where there aren't a lot of bird feeders, make sure you keep feeding birds in the winter so you don't leave them high and dry when it gets cold or snowy. Um, Finally, just since we're talking about bird feeding, make sure you get good bird seed that's for birds, right? You don't want to feed bird bread or other human foods. Make sure it's a good quality bird seed. Okay. Oh, Marianne asked why birds migrate. That's such a good story and question. Tonight's webinar has to cover so much material that I didn't even talk about that. I talk about it in longer classes. Maybe some of you know why birds migrate. Birds migrate mainly because of what things we've been talking about. What determines a bird's beak shape is what it eats, right? Birds migrate mostly to get food. When it gets cold up north, lots of food goes away, goes underground, is under snow and ice, and birds have to go back south where they can get food. That's why a lot of the birds we were looking at, warblers, tanagers, orioles, those birds all eat insects, and so they have to go south. Birds that can find food in the winter, cardinals, blue jays, woodpeckers under the bark, they can stay. So that's the main reason, the quickest answer ever to why birds migrate is to get food. But it's a beautiful, big, complex story. Okay. An anonymous person asked, when trying to spot a bird and someone says 2 o'clock, for instance, how do you know where the clock is? Oh, that's a good question. So if we're on a bird walk, right? if this were an actual walk, we would have talked about this, or an outing, we would have talked about this, I should say. If we're on a bird outing, you often think of a tree as a clock. So because bird trees are often roundish. So if I'm looking at a tree, then to the left would be 9 o'clock, to the right is 3 o'clock, the top is noon, and the bottom is 6 o'clock. So it helps you find the bird. And I might say, oh, the bird's at about 2 o'clock, but like 5 feet into the tree. So you need to know what tree you're looking at. Sometimes people say when they're not looking at a tree, oh, the bird's at 3 o'clock. I never know what that means. I think it's actually people do that because they don't realize it's usually just used for like a particular tree. So if you've seen people do that, anonymous attendee, I don't know what it means either. But if you're looking at a tree, that it means treating the tree, even if it's not exactly round, like it's a clock and where the hours would be on the clock. Hopefully that makes sense. Um, Linda asked whether birds return to the nest each year. That's a really good question. Most birds do not. Most like songbirds that build a nest do usually don't reuse a nest, but they might steal parts of the old nest. Some birds will sometimes reuse a nest or refurbish a nest. Um, Birds that use though like a site, like big birds like red-tailed hawks that build a nest on a fire escape in New York City, for example, might go to the same place every year and just refurbish the nest. Likewise, like a woodpecker or a bird that nests in a woodpecker hole might use the same hole again and again, but refurbish the nest. Um, yeah. I think this is the last question. Um, uh, I recently learned about the bird sanctuary on top of the Javits Center. Oh, and that Staten Island is a haven during migration. Besides the parks, are there other places like this in the city that have concentrated bird populations? Wow, that's a really interesting question. The Javits Center, right, is one of the places that we actually do bird research. There's a gull colony, herring gull colony, right on the roof of the Javits Center in Manhattan, which is wild. We work to keep that colony safe. Um, and we also do bird surveys in the green roofs on both the Javits Center and other places around the city. Um, yeah, I would say as the answer to the question of whether there are other places in the city with concentrated bird populations is yes. There are birds, but there really are birds all over the city. And that's what's so great about birding in New York City. Really, anywhere you go, there are cool birds. There are different birds. And that, like I mentioned at the beginning, and it's actually a nice place to end, even means your local park. It means like a little tiny park on your block. Birders often say bird your patch, right? Your patch is your patch. It's where you bird. And that could be a tiny little corner park. It could be your backyard. It could be a few trees outside your window. Um, and you can see birds anywhere in New York City, and particularly during migration. If you pay attention, you'll be like, whoa, what? And it's in my tree, right? Birds show up in weird places. So you don't have to go. There are amazing places to bird in New York City. And one of the joys of getting to know birds in the city, I think, is that you suddenly realize all these amazing parks that New York City has. At the same time, though, you also realize that there are birds everywhere. There are birds right where you live, and get to know those birds. If you spend time, you don't have to go that far. You don't even need gear, as I mentioned, to start connecting to birds. And we hope that as you connect to birds, and I'll finish with this to let you all go, those of you who are still with me, that you will, I think your natural will come to love the birds if you don't already and want to protect them. That's really what New York City Bird Alliance is about. It's what Tasha and I are working for, is to protect these birds, to get people invested in birds and want to help us to protect them. Birds are in trouble all over the earth. They're in trouble in New York City. And I hope that you will join us to help protect them. I hope that you will join us and come bird watching with us. It's so fun, and we're birding all year round. We have, as I mentioned, loads of free walks, most of them free, and as well as additional walks to be part of. And with that, I think we'll say good night. I really loved having you with us. I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and I hope that we will see you soon. Have a good night.